It's March 31st here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the deadliest wildfires in history here in South Korea. The main blaze of the deadly wildfires that began in Sancheong County and swept through Gyeongsang-do provinces has been fully contained as of Sunday, after raging for 10 days. The government has drafted an extra budget of nearly $7 billion in response. Around 1,700 people have been killed and thousands more injured in Myanmar after a 7.7 magnitude earthquake, with the U.S. authorities warning the death toll could exceed 10,000. U.S. President Donald Trump is very angry with the Russian President Vladimir Putin after the Russian leader failed to come to ceasefire negotiations over the Ukraine war. Trump's now threatening to slap 25% tariffs on Russian oil. It took almost 10 days, but the main blaze in Sancheong County has been finally contained. South Korea's worst wildfires in history resulted in at least 30 deaths. Lee Seung-jae leads us this morning.
The massive wildfires that began in Sancheong County in Gyeongsang-do province and spread through nearby regions, causing the worst wildfires in South Korea's history, has been fully contained. According to forestry officials, the main fires were contained as of 1 p.m. Sunday, nearly 10 days after the initial blaze broke out on March 21st.
There were dangerous situations due to falling rocks and rocky terrain, but it seems they overcame it well and prevented further spread of fires.
The wildfires in regions of the Gyeongsang-do province saw an estimated 1,858 hectares of woodland burnt, equivalent to around 2,600 football fields. The fires in Gyeongsang-do province saw about 48,000 hectares of woodland affected, equivalent to 80% of the size of Seoul. At least 30 people died, including 26 in Gyeongsang-do province. More than 3,000 houses were completely burned down, and significant damage was also reported to 30 national heritage sites and 2,000 agricultural facilities. In order to extinguish the remaining fires, the military deployed 600 soldiers and 49 helicopters on Sunday, and is also providing medical and other assistance. The government will now focus on helping those that have been affected by the massive wildfires. This includes providing temporary housing and other assistance for those who have been displaced. Also, the government will provide livelihood support, including lowering fees for health insurance premiums and costs for cell phone and internet and medical aid. Since the outbreak of the wildfires, approximately 10,000 volunteers have participated in recovery and support for the displaced. The government also announced on Sunday that it will push for a supplementary budget worth 10 trillion won, or $6.8 billion, which would also include budget for wildfire recovery. Some $37 million were also donated to disaster relief organizations in the hope that victims and the areas affected by the wildfires can recover quickly. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In Myanmar now, rescue workers are continuing their search for survivors after a major earthquake with a death toll above 10,000 expected. And WHO is responding with its highest level of emergency response. Our Shin-Young tells us more.
The 7.7 magnitude earthquake struck central Myanmar on Friday, causing widespread damage. According to Myanmar's military, the quake struck the country's central region on Friday, killing over 1,700 people and injuring more than 3,400 as of Sunday. With the lack of equipment and personnel, rescuers have been working with their bare hands in an effort to find survivors.
We were able to rescue a man aged around 24 from the rubble. It took us 24 hours for this operation to save this man. He had been stuck under the rubble for about 40 hours.
Damage has also been reported in neighboring Thailand, where authorities said at least 18 people had been killed and at least 78 missing as search and rescue operations continue. And with the death toll in the region rising quickly, the United States Geological Survey estimates a 71% probability that the number of fatalities will exceed 10,000. In response to the earthquake, international organizations are emphasizing the need for urgent aid. According to AFP, the World Health Organization on Sunday declared the earthquake a top-level emergency and urgently requested $8 million to save lives and prevent disease outbreaks over the next 30 days. Meanwhile, Myanmar's military junta is continuing airstrikes in the war-torn country with attacks on insurgents despite the earthquake. According to the BBC, at least 7 people were killed in a strike just hours after the earthquake on Friday, with further attacks taking place over the weekend. The UN has called the attacks completely outrageous and unacceptable. 신하영, 아리랑 뉴스.
President Yoon's impeachment case has continued for more than 3 months, as the justices take a record amount of time to deliberate on the embattled leader's fate. But pundits believe the court is in the last phase of reviewing the case. Our Oh Soo-young reports.
The Constitutional Court could issue a ruling in President Yoon's impeachment trial this week, as deliberations are believed to have reached the final stage. According to legal experts familiar with the matter, the 8-member bench is now wrapping up its review of key grounds for Yoon's impeachment after more than a month of almost daily meetings, the longest the court has ever deliberated on a presidential case. Once each justice expresses their opinion, they're expected to draw up their collective decision before announcing the ruling date 2 to 3 days in advance. While it could be as early as this Thursday, if the bench schedules a Friday ruling in line with past presidential impeachments, April 4th and 11th are key dates to watch. But given the record deliberation period, observers say the verdict could take longer to be issued, as the justices may be sharply split in their opinions on whether or not President Yoon's martial law declaration warrants an impeachment. The court needs at least 6 votes to remove a president. If 3 or more justices are against impeachment, Yoon would be restored to office. At this point, April 18th is broadly considered the deadline for the bench, the date Justices Moon Young-bae and Lee Mi-sun retire. In 2017, the court dismissed President Park Geun-hye on a Friday before Acting Chief Justice Lee Jong-mi stepped down the next Monday. But this time around, the 2 vacancies would leave only 6 justices on the bench, below the 7-member threshold required to deliver a ruling. Meanwhile, political tensions are escalating following the recent acquittal of opposition Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung in one of his 5 criminal trials. As Lee currently leads polls for presidential hopefuls, the ruling People Power Party fears an early election could benefit the opposition leader and is pushing the court to dismiss or reject Yoon's impeachment. On the other side, the DP is hardening its stance. Some lawmakers call for another motion to impeach acting President Han Duck-soo, despite the Constitutional Court's dismissal of their previous attempt, along with Finance Minister Choi Sang-mo. Other DP members are demanding the urgent appointment of a left-leaning Judge Ma Eun-hyuk to secure a 6-vote majority to impeach the president. As for public opinion, support for the 2 major parties are split evenly at 36%, with moderates caught between both political extremes, Yoon's immediate return, or the opposition parties' continued offensives against the incumbent government. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
So the delay in the justices' final call for a ruling date continues. What's taking so long? Let us turn to Professor Song Se-ryun for more. It's good to have you back, Professor Song.
Good morning.
So I do have to ask once again, why do you think President Yoon's impeachment ruling got pushed into April? Why is it taking longer than we all expected?
Well, we were expecting a quick turnaround, but the law says they can only have to make the decision within 180 days. So anytime before June, they could say they are on time. But you're right. The hearing part of it has ended more than a month ago. And the previous examples show that the conferences of judges don't really take that much time. But I have to say that each case has its own dynamics and therefore its own schedule. In this case, we can just summarize some of the things that makes it a longer process. Issues are complex. Clearly, there were procedural issues, substantive issues, and because the criminal trial is ongoing at the same time, some witnesses took fifth or refused to testify, so there were some complications about that. And unlike some people's contentions, yes, the acts may be clearly unconstitutional, but the next question is whether it is serious enough to strip him off the office of the president. So these kind of discussions apparently take longer. And I think another political situation is that the country is evenly divided. So the justices know that whatever decisions they come up with, they will be attacked or questioned ad hominem. So one possibility is that they have reached the decision already, but they might be taking a very long time to write a decisions because the text has to be very persuasive and error-free. So they could be one of the possibilities, or they might be just genuinely divided about the differences of opinions, not to get to the unanimous votes, but to talk about the issues, to get to the necessary elements to take the final vote.
Maybe the delay itself speaks for itself, how complicated, complex, and serious the whole case is. But what's widely believed is that the court's announcement for a ruling date will come after this Wednesday when by-elections are taking place. What's your take on it, Professor Song?
Well, that's understandable because a judicial process usually looks at the political process and not to interfere with it. So any kind of big elections, even the by-elections, they want to stay clear of it as much as possible. So announcing it after Wednesday, when it is over, makes sense. In this case, it's a delay of a couple more days, even if they are all done with their processes.
But can we be certain that the ruling will be wrapped up before April 18th? Can we be sure of that?
Well, nothing is sure in life. We
Indeed
learned that in real time. But there are continue to have the indication that that is the case. As discussed before, April 18th, it's like a cliff-like deadline where two justices come off the bench. And if that happens, we pass that date, things will get more difficult to do it. So I think that the justices are all mindful of that deadline. And the Constitutional Court has shown many examples or behaviors to hasten or to expedite this proceedings. So I don't think that has changed. And in terms of decisions, they don't have to reach a unanimous votes on both sides to impeach or not to impeach. The only question is whether they have the 6 votes on the impeachment. If not, they can take a vote and announce that the impeachment is rejected. So I don't think it's the difficulty of a deadlock situation. It's not like a hung jury situation in a jury trial. So I think that the process can be hastened as long as the conference of the judges part is over.
And in the meantime, the person who is at the center of this whole political turmoil, President Yoon, is keeping rather quiet and maintaining a low profile, I have to say. What do you think the reason is behind his silence?
Well, I think it's too early to be too public from the president's point of view. Anybody who's waiting for the decision, it's better to look like that person respects the court's forthcoming decision and humbly await the court's final words. And one bad publicity coming from him or anybody associated with him can be a disastrous burden to the court and to his chances of getting cleared. So at this point, I think he's setting an example that he will be quiet so that others can also be quiet because, as we know, his supporters, some of them are radical and very extreme. They can even bring some violence. So at this point, I think the president would be very careful about that. But I wouldn't be surprised if he makes some statements. For example, the wildfire statement. He wants to be presidential in preparation for the chances that he can come back to become the leader once again. So I think he will be very selective, but his silence is strategic as well.
So maybe he doesn't want to take the risk of causing unnecessary drama like violence.
Right. At this point, the drama is very bad, can be a very bad happening to the president. Any kind of misstatement, any kind of misconstrued actions, too early champagnes or too defeatist statements, those can influence not only the public, but the justices. Justices are not sequesters. They watch news, they hear what people say, although they want to take some distance with the public opinions and so on and so forth. But Constitutional Court, by characteristics of it, is on one hand plunged in the public opinions and what happens in the society. So I would be very careful in terms of how he can adversely affect either the public opinion or the justices in the Constitutional Court.
Professor Song, it's always good to have you with us. This morning, as always, you have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you.
The Trump administration's reckless tariff policies have made the importance of regional economic cooperation more than ever. And ahead of Trump's looming April 2nd tariffs, trade ministers of Seoul, Tokyo, and Beijing met up here in Seoul. Our Moon Hae-ryun has the details.
The trade ministers of South Korea, China and Japan met in Seoul for the first time in nearly 6 years and underscored the need for stronger economic ties and pledged to expand trade partnerships amid growing global uncertainties. At the Trilateral Economic and Trade Ministers meeting on Sunday, South Korea's Trade Minister An Duk-gun, China's Commerce Minister Wang Wentao, and Japan's Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry Muto Yoji emphasized the importance of a stable global trade system and vowed to strengthen cooperation in key economic sectors. Their discussions came just days before the U.S. government's scheduled announcement of new reciprocal tariffs as the three nations navigate rising protectionist pressures. The meeting was seen as a strategic move to coordinate a response with all three nations facing similar concerns as major U.S. trade deficit partners and potential targets of tariffs. And as a result, the ministers aligned on the broader goal of preserving a stable international trade system. During the talks, the ministers reaffirmed their commitment to multilateral trade frameworks, supporting reforms at the World Trade Organization and expanding the regional comprehensive economic partnership to include new members. They also pledged to accelerate negotiations for a high-level trilateral free trade agreement.
It is necessary to strengthen the implementation of RCEP, in which all three countries have participated, and to create a framework for expanding trade cooperation among the three countries through Korea-China-Japan FTA negotiations.
While South Korea and China currently have an FTA in place, discussions on a three-way agreement have stalled due to differing economic conditions and national priorities. Beyond trade agreements, the ministers addressed broader economic concerns, committing to stabilizing supply chains and expanding cooperation in green and digital industries. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump warned he will impose secondary tariffs on Russian oil if Moscow doesn't agree to a ceasefire agreement with Ukraine. Speaking to NBC on Sunday, Trump warned that if Russia doesn't agree to the ceasefire, he will put secondary tariffs on oil coming out of Russia. He added that the 25% tariffs could happen at any moment. He also said that he plans to speak with Putin later this week. The U.S. president also told NBC News that he was very angry after Russian President Vladimir Putin questioned the credibility of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's leadership. South Korea's economy rebounded in February, with production, consumption, and investment all increasing compared to the previous month. According to Statistics Korea on Monday, the overall industrial output saw an increase of 0.6% compared to the month before, largely due to gains in the service and mining industries. The construction industry returned to an upward trend for the first time in 7 months. Now, retail consumption was up 1.5%, and facility investment jumped by a huge 18.7%. An official from Statistics Korea attributed the overall increase to a base effect, resulting from a decline in the previous month caused by fewer working days due to a long Lunar New Year holiday. South Korea has fully lifted its ban on short selling on Monday. Now, short selling is now allowed for all listed firms for the first time since March 2020, when the ban was introduced due to the market crash caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. And then the ban was partially lifted in May 2021, but temporarily reimposed in November 2023 after a series of naked short selling violations by global investment banks were discovered. Ahead of the resumption of short selling, the Korea Exchange has set a new system to detect any illegal practices.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. Greenland's new prime minister, sworn in on Friday, firmly rejected U.S. President Donald Trump's renewed interest in acquiring the Arctic territory, emphasizing Greenland's autonomy and self-determination. On Sunday local time, Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen responded to President Trump's push to acquire Greenland. In a social media post, Nielsen stated, "Let me be clear, the United States will not get it. We do not belong to anyone else. We decide our own future." President Trump on Friday once again expressed confidence in the U.S. acquiring Greenland, describing it as 100% certain and citing national security interests. Meanwhile, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance's recent visit to Greenland's U.S. military base further raised tensions as Vance criticized Denmark's administration of Greenland, implying that the U.S. could offer better security and governance. Moving over to the Middle East, Hamas has accepted a new ceasefire proposal mediated by Egypt and Qatar. However, Israel has responded with a counteroffer. Hamas chief Khalil al-Hayya announced on Saturday that the Palestinian militant group has agreed to a ceasefire proposal from Egypt and Qatar, which includes the release of 5 hostages. In return, Israel would permit increased humanitarian aid into Gaza and a halt to hostilities. The deal also includes the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners by Israel. Israel has submitted a counter-proposal demanding the release of 11 living hostages and half of the deceased hostages in exchange for a 40-day ceasefire. Meanwhile, Israel is seeing large protests urging the government to prioritize negotiations for the hostages' release. Over in Europe, a space rocket launched by German startup Isar Aerospace on Sunday local time crashed approximately 40 seconds after takeoff from a spaceport in Norway. The uncrewed Spectrum rocket, 28 meters long, was designed to carry small and medium-sized satellites and marked Europe's first attempt at an orbital flight from the continent, excluding Russia. Despite the outcome, Isar Aerospace's CEO said the test was a great success, citing the collection of valuable data for future missions. The attempt reflects Europe's ambition to establish independent space launch capabilities. Finally, in the United States, renowned actor Richard Chamberlain, celebrated for his roles in Dr. Kildare and the award-winning miniseries The Thornbirds, died at the age of 90 on Saturday local time. Chamberlain died in Hawaii due to complications following a stroke. A 3-time Golden Globe winner, he first gained fame in the 1960s after starring in Dr. Kildare, which made him a teen idol. Beyond television, Chamberlain appeared in films such as the Oscar-winning movie The Towering Inferno and The Three Musketeers. His lifelong partner, Martin Rabbit, paid tribute, expressing, "Our beloved Richard is with the angels now."
We're starting off on a chilly note to wrap up March. Inland areas are feeling even chillier. However, temperatures will rise quickly this afternoon, bringing us back to season norms in most places. But the biggest concern today is the ongoing fire risk. The wildfire crisis alert level remains in the highest range nationwide. The air remains extremely dry, and strong westerly winds could make any small flames spread rapidly. We've already seen devastating wildfires in several regions, and with conditions like this, the risk remains dangerously high. Afternoon highs will be 2 to 8 degrees higher than yesterday, topping out at 14 degrees Celsius in the capital and Gwangju. Daegu, Gyeongju, Daejeon will be topping out at 15 degrees under mostly sunny skies with decent air quality during the day today. Then welcome rain is in the forecast on Wednesday in the central region, Gyeongsang-Pukdo and Jeollabuk-do provinces, which could help to ease dry conditions. But for now, please stay alert, stay fire safe, and take extra care outdoors.
That wraps it up for us this morning. Arirang News will be back with more stories making the headlines at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.